Good morning, boys. We were originally scheduled to have a Zoom session today, but because of the Zoom bombing incidents, it looks like that's not going to be able to happen. So this whole class is going to be recorded here on the on this video. Okay. Before I get started, I just want to go over what we're going to be doing today. All right, we're going to go over very quickly. Do not go gentle into the night. We'll also review Lift Not the Painted Veil. Okay. And then you guys are going to do the quote-unquote Poetic Devices quiz, okay, after the video. And this quiz is ungraded, okay, and you will find it on Schoology, not Socrative. Okay, I'll repeat that at the end of the class. You'll find it on Schoology, not Socrative. Do the quiz as seriously as you can. It's for me to see how well you know your Poetic Devices, okay, but it will not go in the grade book. So please take it seriously. Don't cheat, quote-unquote. You know, it's just so I have a good understanding of where you guys are at with it, okay? Your homework over the break, if you can call it a break, is to do the following, okay? You're going to read and thoroughly annotate the next two poems. Those poems are called The Road Not Taken and Into My Own. Both of them are by Robert Frost, okay? So you're going to read and thoroughly annotate those two poems, and you're going to fill in and submit an empty form called a TP-CASTT form, or chart, on both poems. I will go over those charts later on in the class, okay? And then lastly, you're going to write a 2-page, double-spaced informal essay comparing and contrasting the meaning of each poem, right? And while you're contrasting them, I also want you to pay special attention to the imagery, the symbolism, and the tone of both poems, okay? So I want you to compare and contrast with an informal essay, okay? So if you have any questions about any of that, please just email me and I'll gladly respond. Okay. So let's get started with the class. I just want to conclude our study of Do Not Go Gentle into the Night. Okay. These are my annotations of it. Okay. But what I really want us to think about is this. Okay. One of the main ways of understanding a poem is by looking at its structure. Okay, its organization, right? Much as you would, for example, an essay. Okay, every poem has some sort of internal organization that you need to figure out. Okay, and oftentimes that organization is given to you by the type of poem. Okay, as you guys saw from the Edpuzzle, "Do Not Go Gentle in the Night" is a villanelle, right? Which is 6 stanzas of 5 tercets and 1 quatrain. Okay, and so in this case, the first stanza kind of gives us the thesis of the poem, right? Namely, that one should not accept death, but rather rage against it, and do not accept the dying of the light. Okay. Let's say the next 4 stanzas then talk about individual men with very different characteristics, right? The wise men, the good men, the wild men, the grave men, and how each of those men, despite being very different, all rage against the dying of the light, okay? In some way, every single one of these men, because they're so different, makes the point that all men should therefore rage against the dying of the light, okay? And then we finally get the last quatrain, which is addressed to the father through an apostrophe, right, to bring up a poetic device there, where he addresses his father and says, you know, because all these men and because all men rage against the dying of the light, you in particular should also curse and bless me with your fierce tears, I pray. Okay, so we get right there, right? It makes it much more accessible now that we understand the structure of the poem. Okay. So, you know, for example, right, let's go through each one of these individual men. The wise men, for example, they know that dark is right? What do they know? They know that death is inevitable. They're wise, right? They've come to accept the fact that death is an inevitable part of life. Okay? However, their words fought no lightning, right? Which seems to imply that they did not, their words were not violent enough, were not strong enough, did not move people enough, right? They were wise and they understood the world, but perhaps they regret the fact that their lives were not as influential, perhaps, of others, or as they would have liked it to been. So they do not go gentle into the night. They have regrets. The good men, right? Their frail good deeds, and perhaps the last of good men, that seems to be what the last wave by, the last of the good men, Okay, their frail deeds did not dance as they thought they might have on the green bay. Green bay seems to imply or connote life. Okay, they did not dance. They're frail. They weren't strong enough. Right? They weren't as strong as they thought they were. And again, they then rage against the dying of the light. Wild men, perhaps they in their life they did not, maybe the opposite of the wise men, right? Did not realize that death was inevitable and coming, right? And as a result, did not take it, perhaps did not appreciate life as it came to them as fully as they wanted, okay? And then grave men, right? Grave men realized that there were, with the paradox of blinding sight, that their eyes, despite being blinded perhaps by death, could still see truth, okay, and could still see something important about life, okay. So we see all these men, okay, and so in some way the lesson that we can see from this is, we do see a little bit of Ivan Illich in this, insofar as all these men realize something important on their deathbed, that namely all men, gentlemen, regret something about their lives on their deathbed. Okay? That all men feel like they've missed out on something because the way they choose to live their life inevitably avoids other things, right? There's something that you've always missed out on. Okay? All men do. All right? So in some way, it is, while it's connected to Ivan Illich, it's somewhat opposite to Ivan Illich. Ivan Illich did not rage in his deathbed, but finally accepted death. Okay, so it seems to be in some way the antithesis of Ivan Illich, right? His realization is that death, or acceptance of death, is an acceptance of life. Okay, so this is a lot more violent than the ending of Ivan Illich. Okay, all right, so let's move on. Okay. Let's move on to Lift Not the Painted Veil, okay? And in this case, okay, Lift Not the Painted Veil is what you call a sonnet, right? A 14-line poem, okay? In this case, a Petrarchan sonnet, okay? Now, Petrarchan sonnets have different structures, and you had to figure them out, right? Just to look at this one, usually a Petrarchan sonnet is organized by the first 8 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then the last 6 lines. Okay, but this one seems to be a little bit different. Okay, first, and it seems to be organized by its sentences. Okay, so the first section, we could say, of the poem is a sestet, right? 6 lines, right? That goes on to the first period. Second section is a quatrain, again, 1 sentence, and then the third section is another quatrain. Okay, what I want you to do right now is just pause, right, and take a look and try to label what the topic of each of these sections of the poem is. Okay, what is the topic of each of these sections? All right, and once you figure out the topic of each of the sections, you'll see how the poem moves. Right, you'll see the thread that runs through the entire poem. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Okay, just pause right now and label them in your notes. Okay. Okay, so first section, I'll read it to you guys. All right, Lift Not the Painted Veil by Percy Shelley. Now note the one similarity between this poem and our previous poem, right? Both poems have commands of what not to do, right? Do not go gentle into the night, or rage against the dying of the light. And here, lift not the painted veil, right? So both of them are commands of what not to do, all right? So lift not the painted veil which those who live call life, though unreal shapes be pictured there, and it but mimic all we would believe with colours idly spread, behind lurk fear and hope, twin destinies, who ever weave their shadows over the chasm, sightless and drear. So the way I would say this, right, guys, is the first stanza, or the first not the first stanza, but the first section of this poem, the sestet, seems to describe what the painted veil is and what is behind the painted veil. Right? Painted veil seems to be a metaphor, right? A veil is something that we cover our faces with, either at a funeral or at a wedding, right? They seem to be connected. And it's a painted veil. In other words, we can't see through it, right? It's painted with unreal shapes, right? And with those who live call life, okay? In other words, it's if you've ever heard the term rose-tinted glasses, right? This seems to be something akin to that, right? That we live not by interacting with life itself, but rather with a version of life that we prefer, right? A painted veil with unreal shapes pictured there, okay? They are idly spread over that veil, okay? Now, behind that veil are the things that we don't want to see. Fear and hope, twin destinies, right? Fear seems to inspire hope, and that's why fear comes first, okay? Fear and hope, whoever weave their shadows over the chasm, sightless and drear. So the things that we don't want to see are fear and hope, which are shadows that are over this chasm, right? Seems to remind me of, seems to be alluding to the valley of the shadow of death, right? But nonetheless, it's something we don't want to see. Okay, so again, what seems to me that this reminds me a lot of Heart of Darkness, right? Namely, if you remember Marlowe when he returned to Brussels, right, and his reaction to all those who were living with the illusion, right, of a comfortable bourgeois modern life after he'd come back from the Congo, right? How they were lying to themselves about so much of what the world was really like. Okay. Now, a few things. Note another thing. Note the rhyme scheme, right? Or the lack. There seems to be some issues with the rhyme scheme, right? This is a Petrarchan sonnet, and usually there's a pretty consistent rhyme scheme, or should be, right? Usually the first octet should be a B B A B B A, right? Usually it should be that, but this one seems to be a little bit different. Here we have A here, right? Fear, let's see, weave and, oh, sorry. So, B, okay? And fear and there don't really rhyme, do they, right? There and fear doesn't really rhyme. Fear, oh, sorry. Let's go back there, actually. So there's a few, well, I guess my point of the matter is this. Let me just go back here. Fear rhymes with drear, right? Sorry. Okay, let's just stop there again. Okay, so we have A, believe, and weave. B, fear, and drear, okay? And there, or live, don't really seem to rhyme, do they? Okay, this is what, there's a lot of off-rhyme, right? Later on we see love and approve, and move and strove, right? They're highlighted in red there, right? I wonder why he includes so much off-rhyme, and why the rhyme scheme seems to be so off at times, right? I mean, this one should be C, D, D, right? And then E, F, right? But a lot of these rhymes do not rhyme, right? They're off, okay? So again, why, right? Is there something about the topic of this poem which inspires off-rhyme, where something might be a little bit off, right? Is the veil something that looks like it should, and like tries to make the world into something that is poetic and with rhythm and with rhyme, but in fact there's something false about it, right? Could you make that argument? Okay, so yes, there is something off about the rhyme. Okay, let's go to the second section of the poem. Okay, as I think it seems to be pretty clear what the topic of the second section is. In other words, the speaker knew someone who once lifted that veil. Right? And what did he look for? He looked for things to love, real things to love, not fake things to love, we could say, right? Unfortunately, he found them not, alas, right? Nor was there anything at all, that's what ought means, the world contains, the which he could approve, okay? There was nothing that he could love that he could approve, okay? The third section Through the unheeding many he did move, a splendor among shadows, a bright blot upon a gloomy scene, a spirit that strove for truth, and like the preacher found it not. Okay? So in other words, here we start to see that this man who lifted the painted veil was looking for two things, right? Love and truth. Or we can make this claim, true love, right? Not a fake love, not a fake, not something fake that he could live for. Okay? So we see those two things, and unfortunately, it seems that there was nothing to be found, right? Much like Kurtz, we could say, right? Kurtz, who lifted the painted veil and saw nothing but his last words, the horror, right? There seems to be, much like Kurtz's final words, this poem seems to convey a kind of nihilism, right? The kind of nihilism we see with Macbeth as well, right? Macbeth, who at the end of his life said, "Tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow." If you remember that soliloquy, okay? So Percy Shelley seems to have taken a pretty grim look of life here through this poem, right? Do not lift the painted veil. Why? Because you won't find anything there, okay? Only fear and hope, okay? Hope that seems to not be an unfounded hope, right? A hope that doesn't seem to have been have anything at the end of it, okay? So that seems, once again, we see the importance of the structure, okay? Always look for the structure of the poem, because everything will seem to fall into place after that point, right? And sometimes it's the type of poem, right? Whether it's a villanelle or a sonnet that will give you those clues. Sometimes, as we just pointed out, it is the grammar, right? Namely sentences, right? And other times there's going to be words, right? Which are going to show shifts, such as but, right? But is going to, or however, which are going to show shifts in the poem. Okay, but always look for the structure of the poem. Okay, all right. So that's it with the two poems that we've got for today. Okay, now I want to show you guys this chart that I was talking about earlier that you're going to do for the next two poems. Okay, so go to Schoology. Okay, and you'll see under the poetry unit and worksheets and readings, you'll see that TP-CASTT with two T's at the end, right? TP-CASTT. All right, open that up. And you will see here, right, an acronym, right? That's what the TP-CASTT seems to stand for. Now, this is something you guys will use a lot in AP next year, all right? And this is a procedure with which to analyze poem, and I think it's a pretty good one. And if you apply this to all your poems, I think you'll have a better understanding of each one of those poems, okay? So the first thing that we encounter with any poem is the title, right? We have no idea what the poem is about, but the title is the first thing that's accessible to us. So before you even read the poem, what you should do is just write what you think the poem is going to be about based on the title, okay? What are your first impressions based on that title, okay? We'll come back to the title later on, right? But after that, you need to paraphrase, okay? Now, paraphrase is a word, is a carefully chosen word. It does not mean summarize, okay? Paraphrase means that you do, let's say, a no fear Shakespeare of the poem. You write it in your own words, every single word, okay? A summary is shorter than the original work, whereas a paraphrase is as long as the original work, right? So if I were to do a paraphrase of Heart of Darkness, it would be a short novella. If I was to do a summary of, I could do a summary of Heart of Darkness in half a page. Okay, so you need to paraphrase the poem, put it in your own words. And why is that important? Because you guys have to understand, before you get into the deeper meaning of any poem, before you figure out the figurative language or the theme or the tone, you have to understand the surface meaning. If you don't understand the surface meaning, you will not get the deeper meaning, right? So that means look up every single word that you don't know. That means make sure that you understand every sentence and its surface meaning, okay? So make sure you paraphrase each sentence. Okay. After that, you start to look for the connotation. In other words, what those simple words might have some sort of double meanings. You will look at the figures of speech, like simile, metaphor, personification, symbolism, and then you'll look for the sound devices, like alliteration, onomatopoeia, and rhythm. Right. Look for every single poetic device that you can. Okay. After that, gentlemen, you're going to want to look at the tone, right? What is the speaker's attitude towards what seems to be the subject of the poem? Okay. Are there any words that show that reveal the tone? Okay, or the attitude? Okay. Then we have shifts, which is another word for the organization that I was just talking about, right? Rarely does a poem begin and end in the same place. As is true as most of the poet's understanding of an experience is a gradual realization, and the poem is a reflection of that understanding or insight. So look out for words like but, yet, however, although, punctuation, as we just did in those last poems, right? Stanza divisions, irony, right? And any changes in tone or diction. Okay, so look at the organization of the poem. It will give you huge clues. Okay, and so once you've done that, you're going to return to the title. Gentlemen, there will be many, many, many poems that we will read that you cannot understand without taking proper consideration of the title. All right, it's just as important as any line in the poem. Okay, so after you've done title, paraphrase, connotation, attitude, and shifts, return to the title. Right? Look at it now through everything that you've looked at and see whether or not it adds any understanding, adds to your understanding of the poem. Okay? Now, once you've done all that, we have theme. Right? Now, you get to figure out what the poem is saying about the topic that it's addressing. Okay? What do you learn about those subjects? What idea does the poet want you to take away with your concerning these subjects? Okay? Remember that the theme of any work of literature is stated in a complete sentence. It's not just a word, gentlemen, right? Just as I asked you to do with do not go gentle. It's not just death, but rather an attitude towards death with that one, right? In these next two poems, what is the theme? Okay, it needs to be a complete sentence, not just a word. Okay, so that is TP-CASTT, all right? So if you turn the page on this PDF, you'll see that there's an empty chart. What you need to do then is fill in this chart for every single one of for the next two poems, which are The Road Not Taken and Into My Own, okay, by Robert Frost. Okay, so please fill in those two TP-CASTT things after you've read them and annotated them. Okay, so that's it, boys. That's what I'm asking you to do. All right. So now what you guys are going to do is go to Schoology. Remember, not Socrative, and you will see that there's a quiz there. Okay, a quiz on the poetic devices. All right. Again, it's not graded. Right. Don't go with cheating and looking at your chart. It's just for me to get a good understanding of where you are with those poetic devices and how well you've studied them. Okay. So please do that, and have a great break. I'll see you when we return. Okay. All right.